And we're very glad to gather with you all today and to share some updates from a selection of our efforts in the work of peacemaking, and specifically today in some of our faith-based initiatives. So as we get started, if you haven't already, let us know where you're calling in from. Use that chat feature. Well, let's go ahead and begin by taking a look at today's agenda. So we're going to start off by hearing from Telos COO Dave Davis, who's joining us today from Bethlehem. So Dave will have an opportunity to share a little bit about what he's up to there and his experiences on the ground, as well as the future of Telos's IP trips. So we'll hear more in just a moment from him. And then we're going to hear some reflections from our Mosaic Pastors Cohort. And really, we'll hear some experiences from them on the recent ReStory US trip through the American South and how that's shaping their own work in peacemaking in their local communities. And then we'll wrap up today with a time for Q&A, and that will be an opportunity to field any questions you have on today's conversation. So we do just want to note that we'll hold off on taking any questions until the very end of the call, just to make sure we have to get through the entirety of our program today. But as you have questions, please do feel free to drop those into chat. We'll keep track of those, and then we'll get to those at the end of today's call. So let me begin by introducing Dave Davis, Telos COO, who, as I mentioned, is in Bethlehem. He's there for the Kairos Palestine conference. Dave, would you like to maybe get started by just sharing us about what this conference is and what you're getting up to there?
Yeah, well, hello everyone. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so it's good to be with you all. It's 9 p.m. here, and I've had a really long couple of days. So if I just my words don't flow properly, just give me some grace because it's been a tiring few days. But yes, I'm here with Kairos Palestine, which is adjacent to or connected to Sabeel, which is another organization that we have partnered with over the years at Telos. It's a growing number of people throughout this week. The conference itself begins Friday. And the objective of the conference is to redraft the Kairos document, which was the original draft was a number of years ago. And this is a new draft of that communication from the Palestinian church to the world, essentially. So we're here to reframe that, and it's a lot of people who've been at this work for a long time. There's a number of academics here. I'm not exactly sure why I got invited, because I don't really fit either of those two categories. I think I'm here because I can help make things make sense to the average person. I think that's why I'm here. But the focus and the framing of it it's kind of rooted in five things that the Church of Palestine is essentially asking the international world to do, and five things that they're asking the world to not do. And I'm not going to give a lot of color commentary to it. I'll just give you some of the sort of the headline of it is recognize and name the reality clearly. So the people of Palestine are saying, when you talk about this, recognize and name the reality very clear. Name it as genocide, settler colonialism, apartheid. Use those words. Number two, stand for accountability and international law. This is, in the United States, international law it's made to be very fuzzy. Like the way in which our government talks about it is kind of downplays it, but the rest of the world takes it, I think, very seriously. And that the ask of the Palestinian church is that we would do the same. The third thing would be reject and expose complicit theologies, rejecting Christian Zionism and any theology that supports oppression and genocide. 4, practice costly solidarity. And this is a big one. I was in the Jordan Valley yesterday at a Bedouin community, one of the last Bedouin communities in the Jordan Valley. And 2 settler outposts have been established on either side of this group of Bedouins. And they are there to essentially push the Bedouins off their land. These are government sanctioned, government supported, government financed, government weaponized groups of people who every day their mission is to harass these Bedouins to move off their land. So they will knock over their structures, they will send their animals to graze on the Bedouin land. Um, the day that I was there, a settler came on horseback and was a sort of agitating the children that were kind of gathered for their school. And this costly solidarity. While we were there, I met a Russian Jew who lives in Israel, um, who this is what he does. He travels around and bears a conscious witness to what's happening through videos, kind of TikTok and Instagram famous, but this is what he does, and he sheds a light onto it. He can do it because he's Israeli, um, and B, he's of an age where they're not as accustomed to pushing around. So that idea of that costly witness is an important thing. And then number five, support nonviolent resistance and global movements. The Kairos document will expressly advocate BDS as a methodology, as a nonviolent methodology for bringing this conflict or this genocide to an end. The things that they're asking us to do, those are the things they want us to do. The things they would like us to not do is to not call for both sides, right? This is when we talk about this, we don't want to talk about it in terms of well, both sides have issues, or if both sides could come to the table. That this is not an equal playing field, and it hasn't been for a very long time. Do not promote dialogue without justice. Um, we have to address the structures of occupation and apartheid and genocide. It's not just empty, there's real pain happening. So we can't just dialogue without having the underpinning of justice and human rights in there. Thirdly, avoid framing the Palestinian situation as merely religious without acknowledging the political and systemic roots of what's happening here. Do not accept or promote peace processes that exclude justice. And then lastly, do not remain silent or passive in the face of a genocide. So this is the framing of the Kairos document. So this will all be published over the weekend. We're essentially just putting the final touches on it come Friday, and there'll be signatories. Telos will be a signator. I'll be a signator to the document. And it'll be published for the world to see. So I saw someone in the chat say, can we put those 10 things in the chat? My encouragement would be just to wait, because I'm not sure to what degree that framing how that will shape up in the final draft of the document. But I wanted you all to be aware, because it very much felt like a Telos type message. And it is in line with the language that Telos has historically used. And so I felt comfortable sharing those things with you as a way of just sort of priming the pump of what is to come.
Yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit more, Dave, about your time at Kairos Palestine so far, and especially those action steps to take or to avoid. All of that is very helpful. Can you share with us a little bit more about just your experience on the ground so far? What's it been like being there?
Mm. Yeah, so the tour that we had yesterday was very challenging. As I said, we were in the Jordan Valley at this Bedouin community. We were in another community with a Catholic priest who is a remarkable human and is suffering alongside his community as parishioners. And then we ended the day in Jenin with a group of people who have been displaced from the Jenin refugee camp. And so they've been displaced twice. And in one night, the IDF showed up and basically kicked everyone out of this refugee camp, 19,000 people. kicked them out of this overnight with no place to go. About half of those people are, well, about 5,000 of those people are staying at the Arab American University in the dorm rooms. There's about 6 to 7 people in each dorm room. So it's a dorm room. So if you remember back to your college days, it's not a big space. It was tight, probably with 2 people. And we heard stories of them saying, we just want to go back to the camp, not even home. We just not back to our original home. We just want to go back to the camp. So it was gut wrenching. I mean, there's 5 or 6 stories like that from mostly from these women talking about what it's like. It was zero quiet, 24 hours a day. There's no quiet in this building. And when you think about small children and the need for quiet, it's exhausting. The trauma is very real. So I would say that's been my experience here. The trauma is very evident. So the last time I was here was maybe 6 months before the war. And people live with a sense of trauma all the time, but it's much worse. It's much heavier. Um, there's something like 1,000 new checkpoints or 1,000 checkpoints in the West Bank now. And Bethlehem alone, I think there's a couple hundred new gates. In fact, I went from here to Jerusalem today, and we had to turn around several times because something was closed, and the driver kept pointing out to me all the various gates that are new that at any point they can close off. Last night on the way home, the normal length of time that it would take if you could use all the highways would have been about an hour from Jenin to Bethlehem, maybe an hour, 50 minutes, something like that. It took 3 hours to get home because we could only use the roads that are accessible to Palestinians. So there is one main north-south and there's one main east-west. And those are the equivalent to our sort of back roads where they go through towns and go through communities with stoplights and traffic jams and things of that nature. Whereas you weave under the expressway in which Israeli citizens can use very freely. So it's, last thing I'll share, and then I'm happy to answer questions later, but on the way from the Jordan Valley back, there's a couple of brand new, very large settlements that are being established along this Palestinian road. And I would say for maybe 3 miles of that road, every 12 to 15 feet, all along this road was on both sides was an Israeli flag on what is a Palestinian road. It's Palestinian land. And there's no reason for that other than to simply agitate. And that is the experience of the average Palestinian here, is a constant state of agitation. This morning I met with a human rights lawyer, or Palestinian human rights lawyer based here in Bethlehem. And she shared a video of stories from Palestinians who have crossed through what is called the container, which is the main checkpoint between Bethlehem and the rest of the West Bank. And the stories are just horrific of humiliation and physical harm and abuse, both verbal and physical. And it's totally random. I mean, you one day you could walk by and there not be an issue, and the next day you could be on your knees with a gun pointed at the back of your head. So I don't, to top of the call, I don't mean to overly be depressing. This is what the stew that I'm sitting in at the moment. Even though in the city of Chicago where I live, there are armed federal agents, and even near the office, the Telos office in DC, which is located in Navy Yard, there are armed National Guardsmen all over the place. Here, everywhere you go, there's an automatic weapon strapped around a kid who's 19, 20 years old. And that's still really hard to see. Even today, when I was in the kind of the financial district of Jerusalem, sort of like, there's Cartier stores and, Tag Heuer stores and then, kids with machine guns. Um, yeah, it's just a very harsh and stark reality. Um, and that for Telos to come back, which I'm gonna talk about us coming back to travel here in just a minute, but for us to come back, for it to be a Telos trip, it has to be um, semi-equal, where we're spending as much time in the Palestinian-controlled territories, as much time and resources here as we are in Israel proper. And that's really hard right now. Um, the traffic, the detours, the transportation issues, the economy in the West Bank is just been decimated. So everything just represents a real challenge. So we are planning to return. We're working on a very small group of folks to come next month, actually in December, in a solidarity way, and then a much more true to form Telos trip mid-March of next year. So, and I think there's a link to an application process that we'll share for that trip. Um, because it is such a sensitive environment right now, we've added kind of another layer of screening to the folks that might join us on these next few trips back. It's not meant to be exclusive or to cut people out. It's just meant for us to have a good idea of who it is, so that we can balance those trips effectively with the right mixture of people. The last thing we want to do is come back here and, by our presence, create even more difficulties or trauma. But what we want to do is come back here and be witness and to bear witness to what is happening and tell the story. The last thing I'll say, I don't know, Ryan, where I am on time, but the last thing I'll say, it's very clear that part of the Israeli government's push here is the erasure of Palestinian Christians. So this is a population of people that has continually gone down. It's just the population of Palestinian Christians has shrunk. This would be, knowing that there are Palestinian Christians is not something that would be new to anyone on this call, but you would be surprised how many people in the States would be shocked to know that there are Palestinian Christians. Um, there are many of them, and the life for them is very hard and getting harder, and it's really hard to watch. And so this trip has given me a renewed commitment to advocate and to tell the story of all Palestinians, Muslim and Christian, but particularly the Christian story, because they are being targeted. So I'll stop there, unless Ryan, you have any other questions that you'd like me to talk about.
No, I know that the group will likely have more questions, Dave. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing so generously from your time there on the ground so far. And I know you're about halfway through this trip, and so more will be coming up, but really appreciate this chance to hear from you. So to everyone else, I did drop the link to that March 2026 Israel-Palestine trip application into the chat. So feel free to check that out if you'd like to learn more about that trip. And as you have questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat. Thanks again, Dave. Well, next up, we'd like to share with you a little bit about our new Mosaic program and our recent pilgrimage through the American South. Mosaic, as you may or may not know, is Telos's new 2-year peacemaking program, and it's been designed specifically for pastors and church leaders who are looking to become better equipped to engage their congregation in peacemaking work in their local communities. And we launched our first Mosaic cohort this past September, and that includes 13 church leaders from 8 congregations across the United States. And just 2 weeks ago, our Mosaic cohort participated in Telos's ReStory US pilgrimage. We had stops in New Orleans, Jackson, Mississippi, Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, and elsewhere, where we had the opportunity to learn from civil rights leaders, historians, legal scholars, artists, and more about the work of creating the beloved community that they are involved in their respective communities. And today we are fortunate to hear from a few of our Mosaic participants on their experiences on this trip and how it's shaping their own thinking and their work in peacemaking. So to begin, I'd like to invite Alan Thomas to share. Alan is the lead pastor at Outer West Community Church in San Antonio, Texas. Alan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Ryan. Hey everyone, Alan here, and just kind of, I know it's heavy hearing what Dave had to share, and just kind of shifting to some of what we experienced on this ReStory trip. I'm grateful to be a part of this cohort over the next 2 years. Um, the trip was incredible. You know, the words that I used was life-changing, and I've been trying to figure out why. I think life-changing in the sense that I see life through a different lens, totally different lens after some of the experiences we've had, a totally different understanding of what it looks like to work towards justice, and kind of a whole new understanding of what it means to love your neighbor as Jesus commands us to do. Um, and you know, we started off our week time together by witnessing historically, really the theme of the whole trip has been how human beings have the capacity to diminish the humanity of other human beings. And so going back to colonization and the manipulation of indigenous people to um, the transatlantic slave trade, and even after slavery is abolished, while you're free, but the color of your skin still makes you seen below the humanity of people with white skin, and so on. And so this idea of equal but separate. And so we learned about all these things. I'll share one experience that was very eye-opening to me, that kind of points to how this ideology that human beings can have their humanity diminished is still prevalent today. We visited Cancer Alley. It's about an 80-mile stretch in the Mississippi Delta area, where they have the highest risk of cancer in the nation, like in that concentration. And the reason being, these large petrochemical corporations have moved into these, what I believe predominantly Black neighborhoods, and literally killing the residents there due to the pollution. And these plants, you know, as we visited there and met with a group of folks, the concerned citizens of St. James Parish, these plants are right next to homes where people live, and next to elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools where students are attending, you know, to this day, and being exposed to it. I believe the person that we met with, I believe half of her family has cancer. Rare forms of cancer that you might only see a couple places in the country, you're finding in these neighborhoods specifically. And as you hear these stories, you ask yourself, like, why aren't we doing something about it? But as we learned through the civil rights movement and Jim Crow era, like looking back, why wouldn't someone do anything about what happened there, you know? And again, the theme that we learned is that if you can remove the humanity of people, then you can treat them as you will. One of the things that they shared was, you know, as probably many of us know, the Trump administration has cut, I believe, about 80% of the EPA. And it's easy to read stats like that when you're not in proximity, but being there and breathing the air that these neighbors are breathing in, and even being some of us concerned for ourselves as we're in those moments, that proximity does something to you. And that's probably my biggest takeaway from this trip is the proximity to the need, and the situations of people today. And you begin to see the impact that the lack of systems and laws have, and the importance of activism around that. And so I think that's been my biggest takeaway is if you can remove the humanity of people, you can treat them as you will. And that has happened in our nation for centuries and is still happening today. And I think this ReStory trip helps you be in proximity to those things in a way that, you know, even being on a plantation where you can see the bricks laid by children with their thumbprints in it, you know, and it's, you see the innocence of that, but also the brutality that comes with removing a child's humanity. We met with men who were wrongfully convicted and exonerated, who are still now fighting to be repaid for what they experienced, and meeting civil rights leaders. And the proximity to all that has been so crucial for me. And my biggest takeaway is that if we're going to love our neighbors as ourselves, as Jesus teaches, it's impossible for us to do that without being in proximity. And so that's what I carry with me now, and then beginning to consider what that might look like in our own context of San Antonio, with lots of systemic issues. And so, yeah, just such a great trip. I can keep going on. I know some of like my colleagues will share as well. Highly recommend. I'd love to bring our church back to it. And it's also just very well done, from having great hosts like Deshaun and Francis, and good food, and just good company. And yeah, one of the best trips I've taken, both just in terms of experience, but also what I'm carrying with me. So yeah, thanks for Ryan for giving me a space to just share some of that. I'm happy to answer questions at the end if you have any.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing from your experience, Alan, and especially appreciate you naming some of these voices along the way who were so helpful as guides through these different areas of the trip. Yeah, thank you, Alan.
Yep.
Well, next we'll hear from Karen Fancher. Karen is a council member and leader at Village Church in Beaverton, Oregon. Karen, thanks for joining us today, and I believe you may have some photos that you've put together from the trip. You're welcome to share your screen. Rebecca, maybe if we can stop sharing. Oh, got it already. All right. Thanks so much, Karen.
Can you hear me now? Good. Okay. Thank you. Ryan, thank you for the opportunity to share. And I always think a picture speaks 1,000 words. It's really hard to capture the depth of this experience. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about the big picture of the Mosaic program, and especially the ReStory US experience. But I just start by saying it was profoundly moving. I think that you can hear about oppression, slavery, current tensions, but to meet people who are living them and living with perseverance and in many with deep convictions of how their faith shapes the ways that they respond was incredibly moving. It was incredibly humbling to realize that I've worked in academia. I think that I have a pretty good grasp of some of these issues, and yet there was so much that I could not see until I really came face to face with people who could tell me the stories and really see the depth and the impact of history upon individuals today. And just humbling as far as, Lord, really, how am I engaged? What am I really doing? And not that we can carry it all, but we can try to find our place and try to find our voice. At times, very honestly, it was overwhelming. And I think that if anyone's considering going on this trip, that's a really good thing, because it takes us out of our assumptions that we understand or that we have control. And I think it's just really helping us to now really, really walk in the complexity. And then finally, it was inspirational, which sounds really hard to grasp. But because we met people who are choosing to persevere and who are trying to make a difference in their context in the midst of really overwhelming circumstances, and the grace with which they are choosing to do so was very convicting and beautiful. And as my pastor shared last Sunday, it was because they had the hope. If there is a hope that things will be set right, that we're invited into something better, then we can try to work towards that today. So that's kind of my introduction. And I just have a couple pictures because I think it captures this. There's Ryan. Look at the expressions on the faces. The profoundness of the trip was not necessarily, although it was, the sights that we saw, but it was really hearing voices and just being invited to step into people's stories. I think the ReStory US is really a profound title. And so a lot of it was really just listening, just stepping out of our reality and saying, what does your reality look like? And so, and I'll be very honest, I've for quite some time wanted to do a similar trip and really thought I can go to these sites, but I never would have heard the stories and really learned from the reality. And I so appreciate how Telos has really very built trusted relationships with people who have both profound experience and depth of insight. And then we visited some museums, we visited memorials, and I think what it did for me was also to clarify my values in the midst of our current reality. I hope I'm not freezing. Am I freezing? Are we okay? I'm not freezing?
No, you're okay, Karen.
Okay,
Please.
on my screen I did. I just wanted to make sure it was all right.
You're okay. Thank you.
Yeah, in our current reality right now, I think that there is a resistance to want to get involved in some issues because voices have been used very um, oppositionally or in ways that don't reflect our values, and to say, how do we stand firm and call out, but do it in a way that that reflects the restorative heart of Jesus. And so I really love this one quote. It says, "We know what you are fighting against, but what are you fighting for?" And I think as a call of believers, what are we fighting for? We're fighting for this beloved community. We're fighting for restoration. We're fighting to see our brothers and sisters honored as the individuals that God has made them, seen. And so I think and I'm still asking myself that question, right? What am I fighting for? I tell you ideals, but I think to really work on that. And then there was another quote that was in Selma. It said, if your piece is missing the picture, if your piece is missing, the picture isn't complete. Why? Because you're the most important piece. And not that I'm more important, but I think what this dear woman was saying was, we all, with one piece missing, it's just not complete. So my piece might feel very small, but how do I walk faithfully? Just a couple other quick takeaways. I think one was really an emphasis on legacy. And what I think Telos did for me is it did not shy from the pain, right? The impact of the transatlantic slave trade, and the current implications, as Alan so profoundly shared, of people being exposed, living in places where there's higher exposures to chemicals, to all sorts of complexity, erasure of voices, but then also the beauty of culture. It's a very balanced trip where we see African Americans who brought us jazz and resilience, and how all of this has shaped us as well. We did visit a plantation, and just seeing the realities. I think about history now, not from what's being told, but maybe what's not being told, or how it's being told. And I'm really listening with new eyes. And I think that was a very special gift of the trip as well. I think Alan said that too. I'm looking at the world with new eyes, not what's being told, but yeah, who am I not hearing, and how are we reshaping history today? And then, sorry, this is a little crooked picture, but we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We went, to Selma, and we met some people who had been very deeply involved in the civil rights movement. And walking across that bridge just kind of brought back the reality of the courage it takes. And I don't think we're a very courageous society anymore. And maybe at least I'm not, because I haven't had to be. That's a reflection of my privilege in many ways. But just really seeing where faith demanded action, and it demanded action that was girded in. Some of the civil rights people we talked to said, I had to love. I had to choose to love. It's not vindictiveness. It's not enmity. And I think that's why this Telos peace building is such a powerful reframe of our experience. And so my last picture is all of us. And we were with a man named Hezekiah Watkins, who was imprisoned at 14. Unjustly, and who then chose to be imprisoned. And Ryan, you'll have to help me, but hundreds of times, he, as a very young activist, decided that he would march and stand and be imprisoned. But he said, I'm glad my brother didn't do this, because he couldn't not react. But this young man had the strength to not react violently, to continue to persevere, and now has this joy and this grace as he engaged with us. Not bitterness, strength of character, but not bitterness. And so I think, it was the people that shaped me most of all. And so these are just a few of my takeaways. And I think that I would just like to encourage us all that our discipleship is how I walk with my brother or sister, how I'm willing to listen, and how I work for the beloved community. And it all sounds very idealistic. So I'm glad, Alan, you brought it more to the very practical. But I think just to have a safe place in this Mosaic program to talk with other people that are working in churches and saying, This is complicated. Our world is complicated. How do we do this? How do we think about this? I'm in Portland, Oregon. How do I think about this in Portland, Oregon? And I think there's a gift that we don't feel alone or just overwhelmed, but we can walk with one another. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Karen.
Sure.
I think you're absolutely right. It is important to remember we're not alone in this work. And I appreciate you just giving us so many powerful visuals of the trip and some of the reflections you're taking away. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Well, next we'll hear from Chad Ellenberg. Chad, thanks so much for joining us today. Chad is the senior pastor of Pleasant Valley Church in Winona, Minnesota. Chad, we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Ryan. First, it's just an honor to be here. Actually, as I'm looking at all of the names, I recognize some of your names and realize that you've gone before in these areas of peace and pursuit of the gospel, kind of putting flesh in the gospel. And I want to say it's for people like me. I was not anywhere near saying yes to something like this just a few years ago. And so it's really been a huge work of the Lord in my heart to even be a part. And even as I'm sitting here, like as Karen was finishing and as Alan was going, I was like, oh no, it's coming, it's coming. This feeling, this weight. I think there's a holy nervousness, but it's kind of this reverent fear because I know how significant the work is in my heart. What's happening. Ryan asked me a couple of days ago, reminding me about this. He said, how are you doing? And I said, I am so unsettled. I'm so unsettled. In our last meeting with Greg Khalil, one of the co-founders of Telos, he said, this is pretty normal after a trip. You're going to have trouble sleeping. You're going to be feeling like up and down, like your heart's just all over the place. And I was like, that's exactly what's happening. But it's such a good thing. And the picture I shaped there, and as I responded to Ryan, was this: I feel like I'm in this boat and we're on high seas and it's taking on water and we're going right into the middle of the storm. But there's also this part that I feel, and some of you may be familiar with that painting by Rembrandt. I've got a copy of it in my office of the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus sleeping in the boat, famous story. A lot of people don't know Rembrandt paints himself into the picture and he's looking at the audience. And it's kind of this look of like, what's happening? And I love that because that's how I feel. There's another guy though that you can't see. You have to look at the high resolution image online, and he is in the hull of the boat, and it's like this really faint picture of this guy that's totally afraid, hiding. I don't even want to be seen on deck. And I'm like, yep, right here. That's me. That's how I feel. And yet in this experience, and I would say as we were on the trip, the just being with this group of people, I was like, okay, they're with me. And I'm pretty sure Jesus is at the helm of this. He's leading. And so I have to stay, though he is leading me into really uncomfortable places. But even as I like looking at the people that I know on the call, Alan, Karen, Ryan, Paul, I think was on here for a minute, Sammy, Dave, I'm like, okay, if they can do this, I know them, they're my friends now, I can do this. So just I would say a couple of things, like as I was there, also just a connection with the people telling us those stories. Karen showed you that picture of Hezekiah. Alan mentioned our tour at Whitney. The guy that was giving us the tour, his name was Justin. He could trace his own ancestors back to the place. Joanne Bland, just right there in Selma. We got a tour from her granddaughter. And so it was really, what I'm finding is that I'm unlearning so much. My stuff, my tradition, my yeah buts. And you probably have those when you have these conversations with people. They want to throw a label at you, or you're listening and you're like, yeah, but what about this? All the qualifiers that I've done for so long as somebody who preaches for a living. You don't want to get in trouble. You don't want somebody to be mad at you. So you say something that's a little on the edge of caring for people that are marginalized or mentioning systemic injustice. And you can kind of see the arm crossers out there and this place of fear. It's like, well, but let me say, kind of the qualifiers. And I think those are falling away. Like they're slowly but surely God is like pulling them away from me. As we were there, we were sitting in one of our first meetings and was already overwhelmed. Deshaun Dyson, the leader of the ReStory portion, I asked him a question. I was like, and it was almost a, what do we do? How am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to take this back? How can I help the people that I'm leading and shepherding? They're not going to like this. And he just said something that I've been holding on to. He said the goal is not a prescription. You're not supposed to experience this and go back and say, okay, here's the project. Here's step one. Here's step two. Is that the goal is for you to allow the Holy Spirit to form you into the truest version of you, so that you can be the hands and feet of Jesus in your community. And so I've been holding on to that. I've been saying like this, okay, I can do this. I was just he left, but Pastor Sammy's office a minute ago, and I was like, okay, here's the latest of the people that are mad at us. But what we've been saying is, you don't have to come with us. We just want you to know we're going. Sammy and I are going. We have these people, and I'll just say too, Telos is my favorite thing right now. It's a lifeline. It's when I'm feeling very discouraged and trying to figure out how to do this here. I can go, I know these people and I can talk to them, and Lord, this is you. This is you. I know it's you. And so I'm staying on this boat. So that's me.
Yeah, Chad, thanks so much for sharing about that experience, and thanks again just for your candor as you name the unsettled experience and the way that that continues to be the case. And we appreciate you continuing to be in the storm without just looking for the quickest way out, and grateful to accompany you in that. Well, friends, I know we've moved pretty quickly through a variety of experiences and themes and topics today, but really now we'd like to open it up to you and to hear from you. What questions do you have based on what you've heard so far, either from Dave's time in Bethlehem and what he was able to share from there, or from our recent Mosaic ReStory US trip? I did see a question from Abigail, specifically for you, Dave. So this question, maybe we can start here. Can you explain how they are specifically targeting Palestinian Christians? And also, when will the new Kairos document be issued?
Yeah, my understanding is the document will be issued over the weekend, and I'm sure Ryan and Rebecca can follow up with this crowd with that document if that would be helpful. I'll provide it as soon as I know that it's out there. In terms of targeting Christians, I think the most common thing that you'll see, particularly in Bethlehem, but throughout the West Bank, is the taking of land owned by Christian families. This is Bethlehem itself, actually. There's a real urgency by the Israeli government to merge the governance of Bethlehem and Jerusalem together. That will take a long time, but there's an urgency for that to happen, which would smooth out the tourism industry for them, right? Less checkpoints, things of that nature. So there's a lot of land confiscation that's happening in the middle of all of that. And so Bethlehem is actually being carved up pretty dramatically right now through land confiscation. One of the places that we visit every time we come here is the Tent of Nations, which is a Palestinian-owned farm. It's been documented, owned by the same family since the Byzantine era. And they have been in a multi-decade-long lawsuit the government has tried in many ways to strip their land. They've blocked the entrance to it, so you have to take this really long route. Daoud and his brother have been beaten within inches of their life. Their olive trees have been burnt to the ground. These are the kinds of things that happen. So land confiscation, burning of olive farms, olive groves, limiting, like the olive harvest is a limited thing now. Palestinians can't actually access their own farms to harvest their olives. So these are some of the ways in which Palestinians, and then very specifically Palestinian Christians, are being targeted. They want all the Christians to leave. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing on both of those levels, Dave. And certainly as we have access to that document, we can share it out with everyone who registered for today's event by email. Well, what other questions do you have? Feel free to drop them into the chat and we can field those for you. And as we're waiting to hear from you, maybe I'll pose a question to our Mosaic participants. I'm curious to hear from you. How are you starting to articulate your experience to your own local community, having returned back home? I'm seeing some smiles, so I assume that that is starting to happen.
Yeah, I can go real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
One of the ways we've done it, the timing has been great. We're in a series on the Beatitudes, and so a lot of the themes just tie in perfectly to um, the work around, peacemaking and justice. And this past week we did the verse on what it means to be a peacemaker, and so naturally that has, I think if I was in another series, I would feel stuck or not being able to voice, but the going through the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5 has been very helpful, and people have received it pretty well. I mean, like Chad mentioned, there's been a couple of people who have been upset or thinking about leaving the church, stuff like that, but that's just a normal part of church life. So, but overall, that series has been a way to reflect on some of this, and then also just bring our congregation along slowly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Yeah, I would add that very much just from a personal approach, even in messages, kind of just sharing. We were in a passage this past week in Jeremiah 29, the famous grad verse that everybody puts on cards. I know the plans I have for you, but not realizing it's right in the middle of you're about to be sent into exile, and just that whole place of seeking the peace of the city and really praying for it. And so just sharing honestly, hey, I haven't done this. Like this is so we have a model of just hopefully most people do this, but we're not going to ask you to do something we're not doing. And so leading by saying I'm going here, I'd love for you to join me if you have questions, and those conversations one-on-one are good and very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks, Chad. Karen, you mentioned Paul's word on hope. Anything else that's been helpful as you return home and are asked about this experience?
I wondered if Paul was here, if he wanted to share. I don't want to speak for him. For me personally, it's really been on personal level. So you come back from a trip and people are like, what did you experience? And so right now it's been just sitting with people and discussing and sharing. And I think that I'm still pondering how to use my voice in ways that I think are really helpful. So I'm still in that process of we are going to have a class in 2 weeks at our church on a biblical understanding of justice and peace as integral. And so so I'm preparing for that. So that's something that's coming up very soon as well.
Great. I love hearing about those classes being offered to extend the conversation. Yeah, thanks, Karen. Well, I've seen several questions come through here in the chat. Dave, this one's for you, coming from Laura. From what you've heard and seen, do you see a path for a two-state solution? And as a follow-up question, where do you see movements of hope?
Oh, it's a good question. 2 years ago, I would have said, yes, I still think there's an avenue for that. Based on what I hear today and what I see, it doesn't appear to be there doesn't appear to be a pathway for a two-state solution. The ways in which the Israeli government is carving up the West Bank and obviously destroying Gaza, it just doesn't feel like repair is possible there. Now, Netanyahu has an election issue on the horizon, which is why you're seeing Trump be so forceful about demanding Israel pardon Netanyahu, right? So, because come October, a year from now, there'll be a new election, and the reason he is in power today is because he's aligned himself with the most extreme aspects of the coalition government. One is an extreme settler, and the other is their kind of their defense minister, their person in charge of keeping the country safe. And those two people are militant, and so I don't really see a pathway. Where I do see hope, though, is in the resilience of these people, of the Palestinian people, and I'm seeing more. Maybe I'm sure it was here all the way along, but I'm seeing more evidence of Israelis being tired of the mistreatment of Palestinians. So I'm seeing more and more Israeli activists in the space that I didn't see even 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, the last time I was here. So I would say in the resilience of the people, the love these people have for their space, their land, their community, is awe-inspiring to me. And that, even though they have been beaten down repeatedly, that still remains true. They do not want to leave their home. It's kind of, yeah, it's hard to talk about. So that's where I'm seeing the hope in people that are broken but not destroyed.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thanks for naming just the emotional reality of all of this as well, that you're experiencing and processing. I appreciate that. Maybe to move slightly from your experience to this future trip that Telos is planning to host in March. Dave, can you speak a little bit about the goal of that trip?
Yeah, that both the very small trip in December and the trip in March are meant to bring solidarity, to show solidarity to the people here. The encouragement that they have articulated back to me and to the others that are here for the Kairos conference, for just being here, has been profound, right? I mean, imagine how isolating it must feel, to not know if anyone really cares. So every time someone shows up, it shows that. So that's the objective of March, is to see what's happened, get a real perspective of firsthand knowledge, be a witness to what's happening, be an encouragement to the people here, and then to take the story back and tell the story. The whole purpose of Telos is to put peacemakers in proximity to these stories so they can go back to the United States and make an impact. And the only way the situation on the ground in Israel Palestine is going to change is if the US government makes it happen. That is the only solution, and we have the power to do that. We're already seeing evidence of that in certain ways, but so that's the objective of that trip.
Yeah, thank you again, Dave. We are getting close to the end of time. We have a few more questions that have come up here. This next one is for you, Chad, and this is coming from Matt. What barriers as a pastor have you had to face as part of your Mosaic journey, and how do you anticipate that journey shaping your leadership?
Yeah, a lot of kind of things have had to fall away. Even though I'm in Minnesota, I'm from the South, and a very, very red part of the country, and pretty conservative theologically. And so there's always this fear part of me, of the ought tos of just pastoring, and very much more of a heady tradition. And so I always imagine there are people behind me that are like looking and going to get me in trouble if I do something. And so just coming to grips with this place of you can't unsee the gospel's impact of that. It has to have hands, it has to have feet. And so I think getting used to that, and how that makes people uncomfortable. That makes me uncomfortable. But I think part of being a pastor is discipling a room full, and I would say our church probably has more, like almost like half and half if you're looking politically. And so even let's say if I get that the side that are just being just wackadoodle in the way they're thinking about things, and afraid of the world and don't want to reach out and don't want to go out and they want to call me all these names, even if if I'm able to successfully see them move over the course of a few months, if we're a church that's doing what we're supposed to, hopefully we have a whole new crew of people coming in and they may be in the exact same place. And so it's that constant tension. I love the practices and principles, and the one that says hold competing perspectives in tension. That's been huge for me. I've been grabbing onto that. But yeah, I think it's just that place of I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't unhear. I really feel like God is in it. And so the willingness, kind of to echo what Dave said, this costly solidarity that the Palestinian people are asking for too. And I think just for the rest of the marginalized and the broken and these places of systemic injustice, it's like, this is, I have to stand there. So I see it shaping me no matter what, and willing to, with kind of like gritted teeth to say, okay, Lord, we can do this. I need to not be afraid of those ought tos and those people, those imaginary people behind me that I think can get me. If I'm in your place, in your will, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Thanks again for speaking so candidly into that experience, Chad. I know that's not always easy, and appreciate how you're navigating that and sharing about it. Well, as we're just a couple of minutes away from wrapping up, Dave, would you mind maybe concluding just really briefly on this additional question from Matt? What's the message you would want the American church to hear right now as it pertains to peace and justice in Palestine?
Yeah. I would say at this moment, the message that I would want the church to amplify is to not turn away, to look at the pain, to look at the suffering directly in the eye, and let it impact your soul. The Israeli government has figured out that if they kill somewhere between 80 to 150 Palestinians a day, we don't really care about it, and it doesn't make the news, and it doesn't really move us. It doesn't change us, right? So that's kind of what they're doing. So even in the midst of this ceasefire, Palestinians are still dying. And so, yeah, I would say look at it, stare at it, bear witness to it from a distance, and don't become numb to it. Because listen, this is a defining moment for the church, and I'm very afraid that the church is going to, over the course of time, the long arc of history, will look back and say that the church missed the mark, not unlike they did during slavery, not unlike they did in many other places in history and time. But I fear this could be another stain on the church, capital C church, if we become numb to it.
Yeah, thanks for that word, Dave. Essential to do all we can to maintain our humanity and our humane response to everything that is happening right now. Thanks for that concluding word, Dave. I want to say thank you to each of our presenters for joining us for today's call, for sharing your experiences on the ground as we are all seeking ways to become peacemakers in our own communities. We do have some ways for you all to continue to engage with the work of Telos and Mosaic. We've dropped those into the chat with all of our links as well. A couple of things that we want to highlight is that we will be opening up our next round of the Mosaic Cohort next spring, but the form is already on our new website, which you're welcome to take a look at. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to be in touch. We're happy to talk with you about that. And the other thing that we want to make sure that we mention is that we are asking folks to now save the date for our Faith in Action gathering that's going to be taking place in Washington, D.C. next June 10th through 12th. Plans are already coming together, and we're excited to share more details with you all soon. Well, thanks again to all of today's presenters, and thank you all for joining us. We're looking forward to seeing you at a future Telos gathering. Be well.